September 14th, 1967. Thai Ninh Province. 5:12 a.m. The jungle is still dark, but it's already alive. Insects scream from every direction. Somewhere deeper in the trees, a bird explodes into flight, startled by movement that doesn't belong. The air is thick enough to chew, wet with humidity and the faint metallic smell of gun oil. Private First Class Michael Mick Callahan, 19 years old, Alpha Company, 2nd Battalion, 27th Infantry Regiment, the Wolfhounds, crouches behind a termite mound and checks his M16 for the third time. His fingers are slick with sweat. His steel helmet sits too low on his brow, but he doesn't adjust it. He doesn't want to move. Around him, the rest of the platoon waits in silence. They've been tracking signs since midnight: disturbed undergrowth, faint footprints, cooking fires extinguished too recently. Intelligence says a Viet Cong unit is operating in the area. Nothing unusual. That's almost every day now. What is unusual is how quiet it is. Callahan can hear his own breathing, shallow and uneven. Somewhere to his left, a man coughs softly and clamps a hand over his mouth. The radio crackles once, then dies. Then it happens. A single shot, sharp, close, not a warning. Contact. The jungle erupts. Automatic fire rips through the trees. Dirt and bark explode into the air. Someone screams, not wounded, just startled. And then the platoon is moving, training kicking in faster than thought. Callahan drops flat, presses his cheek into the mud, and fires blindly toward a muzzle flash flickering between two trees. The recoil rattles his teeth. His heart is trying to punch its way out of his chest. The firefight lasts less than 4 minutes. It feels like an hour. When it's over, the jungle doesn't go silent. It exhales. Smoke hangs low. Leaves drift down slowly, lazily, like nothing violent just happened. Cease fire. The order ripples down the line. 2 Americans are wounded, one in the shoulder, one in the leg. Both alive. The medevac bird is already being called. And then someone yells, "Movement! Front!" Callahan swings his rifle up, finger tight on the trigger. A figure stumbles out of the brush. He's small. Too small. The boy, because that's what he looks like, a boy, trips over a vine and falls hard onto his side. His rifle skids away, landing in the mud a few feet from his outstretched hand. He doesn't reach for it. He just lies there, breathing fast, eyes wide, terrified. "Don't shoot," someone shouts. The platoon rushes forward, rifles trained, boots splashing through shallow water and crushed foliage. A sergeant kicks the weapon farther away and drops to one knee beside the figure. "Jesus Christ," the sergeant mutters. Callahan steps closer. The enemy soldier can't be more than 15, 16 at most. His uniform hangs loose on his frame. His sandals are worn thin. His face is smeared with dirt and sweat, cheeks still rounded with the softness of youth. There's a faint trace of acne along his jawline. His hands are shaking. Callahan stares. This is not what he expected. In training films, the enemy was always faceless. Shadows in trees, muzzle flashes, targets that popped up and dropped when you hit them. This kid has a face. Dark eyes, chapped lips, a thin scar on his forehead that looks old, older than him. The boy looks up at the circle of Americans towering over him, rifles pointed down like judgment. He says something in Vietnamese, fast and breathless. None of them understand. The interpreter arrives moments later, a South Vietnamese soldier barely older than the prisoner himself. He kneels, speaks quietly, gently. The boy answers. His voice cracks. The interpreter looks up, hesitates, then says, he joined when he was 12. No one speaks. He says his village sent him. Silence stretches. Someone swears under their breath. Callahan feels something twist in his chest. Not fear, not anger. Confusion. Deep, disorienting confusion. 12. That means this kid has been fighting for 3 years already. Longer than Callahan has even been out of high school. The boy keeps talking, words tumbling out now. As if once started, they can't be stopped. The interpreter listens, his expression tightening. He says his father fought the French. The interpreter continues. And his older brother was killed in 1964. He says this is all he knows. The medevac helicopter arrives, its rotors thundering overhead, flattening grass and drowning out sound. The wounded Americans are loaded quickly. The boy flinches at the noise, curls in on himself instinctively. Callahan watches him closely. This kid doesn't look like a fanatic. He doesn't look like a hardened killer. He looks like someone who never had a choice. As the platoon secures the area, more figures emerge from hiding. 2 more prisoners, both young. One is missing several teeth. The other can't stop staring at his own hands, flexing them like he's surprised they're still attached. None of them are over 18. The lieutenant arrives, surveys the scene, asks for a report. His jaw tightens when he hears the ages. "Bag 'em and tag 'em," he says finally. "Move out." The operation continues. It always does. But something has shifted. As they march deeper into the jungle, Callahan keeps glancing back at the prisoners being led away under guard. He tries to imagine himself at 12, holding a rifle bigger than his torso, being told who the enemy is before he's old enough to understand what a country even is. He can't. That night, as the platoon digs in and sets up a perimeter, Callahan cleans his rifle in silence. The jungle hums around them, endless and indifferent. Across the clearing, one of the prisoners sits on the ground, wrists bound, staring at the dirt. He hums something quietly, a tune Callahan doesn't recognize. It sounds almost like a lullaby. Callahan realizes, with a cold clarity, that this war is not just being fought by men. It's being fought by children who grew up inside it. And for the first time since arriving in Vietnam, the question that haunts him isn't how do we win. It's what kind of war makes this normal? The jungle offers no answer. It never does. September 15th, 1967. Tay Ninh Province, 6:27 p.m. Dusk settles slowly in Vietnam. Not like nightfall back home, not a clean transition, but a gradual thickening of shadows, as if the jungle is deciding how much it wants to reveal. Cicadas begin their relentless chorus. The heat eases just enough to remind you how oppressive it's been all day. Private Callahan sits with his back against a tree, helmet off, boots caked in mud that's already drying into pale cracks. Dinner is a lukewarm sea ration eaten without appetite. Around him, the platoon talks quietly, laughter forced, voices thin. No one mentions the prisoners, but everyone is thinking about them. The lieutenant briefs the squad leaders in low tones near the radio. The captured Viet Cong have been handed off to South Vietnamese forces for transport to a regional interrogation center. That's standard procedure. Routine. Administrative. Callahan watches the jungle darken and tries to convince himself that this is just another day. It isn't. Later, as perimeter guards are posted, Sergeant Frank Dwyer, a combat veteran on his second tour, squats beside Callahan and lights a cigarette, shielding the flame with his palm. "You all right, kid?" he asks. Callahan shrugs. "Yeah, just tired." Dwyer exhales smoke slowly. "Yeah, that happens." They sit in silence for a moment. Then Callahan says what he's been holding in all day. He was just a kid. Dwyer doesn't look at him. Most of them are. Callahan turns, surprised. Most? Dwyer nods once. You'll see it more. Teenagers, sometimes younger. You stop being shocked after a while. I don't think I want to, Callahan says. Dwyer finally meets his eyes. There's no cruelty there. Just fatigue. War doesn't care what you want, he says. Only what it needs. That night, Callahan draws first watch. The jungle presses in close, darkness layered and alive. Every sound feels deliberate. Every rustle could be someone watching. He grips his rifle and thinks about the boy's face, the way his eyes darted from muzzle to muzzle, searching for mercy without knowing what the word means in English. Back home, Callahan's kid brother is 14, likes baseball, complains about homework, still needs reminders to take out the trash. Here, 14-year-olds carry rifles. Sometime after midnight, flares go up in the distance, white light blooming against the treetops, turning shadows into hard black shapes. No contact follows. Just a reminder. The war never sleeps. October 3rd, 1967, Q Chai District. The tunnels smell like damp earth and rot. Specialist David Ramirez, tunnel rat, 25th Infantry Division, lowers himself carefully into the narrow opening, flashlight clenched in one hand, .45 pistol in the other. The walls press in immediately, claustrophobic, swallowing sound. He hates this part. Every tunnel rat does. Down here, rank doesn't matter. Firepower doesn't matter. All that matters is what fits, and who's quicker in the dark. Ramirez crawls forward, breath shallow, heart hammering loud enough that he's convinced the enemy can hear it. The beam of his flashlight slices through packed dirt, spider webs, scraps of cloth. Then, movement. A shape huddles in a side chamber, barely large enough to sit upright. Ramirez freezes. VC, he whispers into his radio. He inches closer. The figure doesn't move. He angles the flashlight. It's a girl, or what looks like one. Small frame. Long hair pulled back crudely. A black pajama uniform hanging off her shoulders. She can't be more than 16. She's clutching a medical satchel. Her eyes widen when the light hits her. She raises her hand slowly, trembling. Ramirez swears softly. "Don't move," he says, even though he knows she doesn't understand English. He backs out carefully, calling for the interpreter and additional troops. When they pull her out into daylight, she squints and winces like someone emerging from a cave. Her hands are stained dark, not with dirt, but dried blood. The interpreter speaks with her gently. She was a medic. She learned to set fractures before she learned to read. She has been living underground for 2 years. When asked her age, she hesitates. 17. The interpreter finally translates. Maybe. The officers exchange glances. Another one. Another child shaped by a war older than she is. By late 1967, the pattern is undeniable. Across the 3 Corps and IFIP Corps, American units report the same thing over and over again. Captured enemy fighters are alarmingly young. Prisoners barely shaving. Teenagers with years of combat experience. Young men who have never known a time without war. Intelligence officers compile reports. Analysts circle numbers in red ink. This is not a coincidence. It is policy. North Vietnam's war is not built on short enlistments or rotations. It is generational. Children are raised inside ideology, discipline, and sacrifice. By the time they are old enough to carry a weapon, they already know why they are fighting. American soldiers rotate in for 12 months. These kids have been preparing their entire lives. In briefings, officers explain it clinically. The enemy mobilizes youth early. Indoctrination begins in childhood. They see participation as duty, not choice. But those words don't land in foxholes. They land in moments like Callahan's, staring down at a trembling boy who should be worrying about school, not survival. They land when medics treat shrapnel wounds on bodies still growing. They land when tunnel rats pull children out of darkness armed with grenades and courage drilled into them long before fear has time to form. The realization spreads quietly among the ranks. This isn't a war against an army. It's a war against a society that has normalized sacrifice from birth. And that realization is deeply unsettling. Because how do you defeat an enemy who replaces losses not with conscripts, but with sons and daughters raised to expect death? In letters home, soldiers struggle to describe it. They're younger than us. They don't quit. They don't run like we expect. Some don't write it at all. Chaplain reports note rising moral strain, not just fear, not just exhaustion, doubt. The kind that creeps in when victory starts to feel abstract and the cost starts to feel personal. Callahan feels it every time he loads his rifle now. He still does his job. He still follows orders. He still fires when fired upon. But something inside him has shifted. The enemy is no longer a faceless threat. He has a childhood, a history, a reason that predates American involvement. And that doesn't make the fighting easier. It makes it heavier. Because the war is no longer just about territory or ideology. It's about whether force can ever erase something that has been taught since childhood. As 1967 bleeds into 1968, whispers circulate through the ranks. If they're willing to send kids, what does that say about how long they're willing to fight? No one answers. But everyone knows. This war will not end because one side runs out of men. It will end when one side runs out of belief. And staring into the eyes of a captured child soldier, many Americans begin to fear it won't be the enemy who reaches that point first. January 30th, 1968. Outskirts of Hue, 3:12 a.m. The night should be quiet. It isn't. Private First Class Daniel Mercer, U.S. Marines, grips his rifle as the first explosions tear through the darkness. Mortars thump in distant rhythm. Tracers streak low across the sky, red arcs cutting through mist and smoke. Tet. The word hasn't fully registered yet, not as history, not as strategy, only as chaos arriving all at once. Mercer had been told Hugh was secure. Everyone had. That's the lie that shatters first. As dawn creeps in, the scale of it becomes impossible to ignore. North Vietnamese army units and Viet Cong fighters are everywhere. Pouring through streets, occupying buildings, firing from rooftops and alleys. This isn't a raid. It's an occupation. Mercer's squad pushes forward block by block, boots slipping on broken masonry slick with rain and blood. The city smells of smoke and sewage and something metallic that clings to the back of the throat. They take fire from a shattered storefront. Mercer dives behind a low wall, heart pounding, ears ringing. "Contact front!" someone shouts. He peeks around the corner, raises his rifle, and freezes. The figure firing back at them can't be more than 15. Thin arms, oversized uniform, a rifle almost too heavy for his frame. The boy fires again, wildly, terrified, but determined. Mercer fires back on instinct. The boy drops. The sound that leaves Mercer's mouth isn't a shout. It's a gasp. They advance cautiously, clearing the position. The body lies twisted against broken glass, eyes open, staring past the sky. Someone mutters, "Jesus Christ." No one argues. Later, when the fighting pauses long enough to breathe, Mercer sits against a wall, and stares at his shaking hands. His helmet rests beside him. Sweat streaks dirt down his face like war paint he never wanted. He tells himself the same thing everyone does. He would have killed you if you hadn't shot first. It's true, and it doesn't help. Across Vietnam, Tet exposes what many soldiers had already sensed, but never fully confronted. The enemy is not thinning. He is renewing. Captured documents confirm it. Interrogations reinforce it. Entire youth units are mobilized. Teenagers trained as sappers, messengers, medics, riflemen. In Hue, some are found dead in school uniforms beneath black pajamas, hastily pulled on before the fighting. The city becomes a graveyard, not just of soldiers, but of childhoods. American commanders focus on the tactical picture. Enemy losses are catastrophic, units destroyed, infrastructure shattered. Militarily, Tet is a disaster for the North. But on the ground, Marines like Mercer don't see victory. They see faces. Too young, too determined, too familiar. One afternoon, during a brief lull, Mercer helps escort prisoners to a holding area in a school courtyard. The chalkboard still bears half-erased arithmetic problems. One of the prisoners stares at him, barefoot, mud-caked, no older than Mercer's cousin back home. The interpreter speaks quietly. The boy joined at 13. His father died fighting the French. His older brother died fighting the Americans. This is all he knows. Mercer looks away. The war is no longer abstract. It is inherited. By early 1968, the realization hardens into something sharper. American forces are fighting an enemy who has compressed generations of conflict into a single lifetime. These young fighters are not desperate last recruits. They are the product of design, raised in war, educated in resistance, conditioned to endure losses Americans would consider unbearable. 12-month rotations suddenly feel absurd. How do you outlast someone who has been waiting for you his entire life? The psychological effect spreads. Soldiers begin to question metrics. Body counts mean less when replacements arrive younger and more committed. Cleared villages mean less when the next generation fills the vacuum. Captured territory means nothing when belief remains untouched. Chaplain notes speak of moral fatigue, not fear, not cowardice, but erosion. The sense that no amount of firepower can erase a cause that recruits children before they understand what choice is. Letters home grow shorter, more guarded. Some stop altogether. Back in the field, Mercer carries on. He fights, he survives, he follows orders. But the war has changed shape in his mind. It no longer feels like a contest between armies. It feels like an argument with history, and history does not surrender easily. As Tet drags on, the realization becomes unavoidable. The United States can win battles. It can destroy units, secure cities, kill thousands of enemy fighters. But it cannot erase the pipeline that keeps sending children into the fight. And that truth marks a turning point, not just in strategy, but in belief. Because wars are sustained by belief on both sides. And for the first time, many American soldiers begin to suspect that belief may be the one resource they cannot replenish faster than the enemy. February 18th, 1968, Quang Ngai Province, 7:27 p.m. The rain has been falling since noon, not hard enough to flood, not light enough to ignore. It turns the red earth into a slick, clinging paste that coats boots, rifles, hands. Every movement feels heavier than it should. Sergeant Michael Alvarez, 23rd Infantry Division, crouches beneath a poncho stretched between two trees. The patrol is halted for the night. Radios whisper. Cigarettes glow briefly, then vanish. They took prisoners this afternoon. 3 of them. Alvarez can still see their faces when he closes his eyes. One is older, maybe 22. The other 2 could be in high school. They sit now a short distance away, wrists bound, guarded by a pair of exhausted privates who look just as young. That's the part no one mentions in briefings. On both sides of the wire, the war is being fought by boys. Earlier, Alvarez tried to make conversation through the interpreter. Not interrogation, just words. The youngest prisoner answered without hesitation. He joined when he was 12, trained with wooden rifles, learned to crawl before he learned to read. By 14, he was carrying ammunition. By 15, a real weapon. By 16, an enemy. Alvarez remembers nodding, like he was listening to weather reports. Later, his hands wouldn't stop shaking. Across Vietnam, stories like this accumulate quietly, not in press releases, not in official reports, in letters home, in whispered conversations, in the long silences after firefights. American soldiers begin to notice patterns. The young enemy fighters don't break easily. They don't surrender readily. They don't react like men fighting for a paycheck or a promotion. They fight like people who have never imagined another life. Psychologists attached to military units start using different language in their notes. Conditioned resilience, ideological saturation, intergenerational commitment, clinical terms for something deeply human. A population shaped by war so early that peace feels alien. The North Vietnamese system has advantages American planners never fully accounted for. Time, continuity, memory. While U.S. units rotate in and out, the enemy remains. While Americans count months, the enemy counts lifetimes. This difference begins to corrode assumptions. How do you measure progress against an opponent who treats loss as tuition? How do you deter someone who has already accepted death as a possibility before adulthood? Alvarez listens to artillery rumble in the distance and realizes something unsettling. The enemy does not need to defeat the United States militarily. He only needs to outlast it psychologically. Back at base, intelligence officers compile age profiles from captured documents. The data is undeniable. A significant portion of enemy combatants are under 18. Some are barely into their teens. This is not desperation. It is policy. Village-level recruitment, youth brigades, political education beginning in childhood, revolution as curriculum. American officials struggle with the implications. Publicly, they emphasize enemy casualties. Privately, they grapple with optics they cannot control. Photographs of dead teenagers don't read as victories. Interrogation transcripts don't sound like fanaticism. They sound like upbringing. Soldiers feel the contradiction most acutely. Killing an armed adult is one thing. Killing someone who still has a child's voice is another. No training manual prepares you for that. Alvarez watches one of the prisoners shiver in the rain and offers him a cigarette. The guard hesitates, then nods. The boy takes it awkwardly, coughing as he lights it. For a moment, they're just 2 young men sharing silence. Then the war reasserts itself. Orders, perimeters, procedures. Humanity packed away like contraband. By early spring of 1968, the realization spreads through the ranks. The war is not just a clash of armies. It is a collision between timelines. America is fighting on a schedule. The enemy is fighting on inheritance. Every village cleared contains children who watch their brothers die. Every ambush teaches lessons to boys not yet old enough to shave. Every bombing plants memories that will mature into resolve. This is not a war that ends when one side runs out of men. It ends when one side runs out of belief, and belief American soldiers are beginning to fear is not on their side of the equation. Morale does not collapse overnight. It erodes, in jokes that stop landing, in optimism that sounds rehearsed, in the growing distance between what soldiers are told and what they see. Alvarez writes home but tears the letter up before sending it. How do you explain fighting children without sounding like a monster? How do you describe an enemy who frightens you not because he is cruel, but because he is committed? The realization is not defeat. It is something worse. Clarity. And clarity brings questions no one is ready to answer. March 29th, 1968. Near the Laotian border. 2:11 a.m. The jungle is quiet in the way only Vietnam can be quiet. Not peaceful, watchful. Lieutenant Daniel Mercer, 1st Infantry Division, kneels beside the radio, antenna tilted toward a slit in the canopy. The patrol is deep, farther than planned, farther than comfortable. The map says friendly lines are miles away. The jungle says distance means nothing. The transmission crackles, static, breathing, a voice asking for confirmation. Mercer responds softly, careful not to give the jungle anything to aim at. They made contact an hour ago, brief, violent, confusing. The enemy broke off almost immediately, melting back into the darkness like they always do. No pursuit, no counterattack, just disappearance. But they left something behind. A body. Mercer didn't look at it at first. He didn't have to. He could already tell from the shape under the poncho. Too small. Now the medics work quietly, more out of habit than hope. A flashlight flickers across a face barely old enough to hold a razor. The boy's hands are calloused. His uniform is worn thin. His chest is still warm. Mercer feels something inside him give way, not dramatically, not visibly. Just a small final release. He keys the radio again. Contact concluded, he reports. One enemy KIA. He pauses, then adds, estimated age, 15, maybe 16. The pause on the other end is longer than protocol allows. Copy, the voice finally says. Nothing else. There is no box for this on the form. Across Vietnam, moments like this stack quietly on top of one another. No headlines, no ceremonies, just accumulation. By 1968, the U.S. military has learned how to fight the Viet Cong tactically. Patrols adapt, units improve, firepower overwhelms. But emotionally, something has shifted irreversibly. The enemy is no longer faceless. He has a childhood, a village, a story that began long before an American boot touched Vietnamese soil. And that makes him harder, not easier, to defeat. Soldiers begin to speak differently. Not about winning, about ending. Not about victory, about survival. They count rotations, days left. Flights home. The enemy counts generations. That imbalance becomes the war's quiet gravity. Intelligence assessments in Saigon grow more candid. Analysts note that North Vietnamese recruitment pipelines remain intact despite massive casualties. Replacement rates exceed expectations. Morale remains high. One report states it plainly. Enemy losses are being replenished by ideological commitment rather than material incentive. Another adds, youth indoctrination appears to offset battlefield attrition. These documents circulate internally. They do not make speeches. They do not appear on television, because there is no way to explain to the American public that they are fighting an enemy who has been preparing children for war since before Americans arrived. And there is no way to justify what that means. Mercer sits alone after the patrol moves on. The jungle resumes its normal sounds, insects, distant water, leaves shifting under unseen movement. He realizes something he cannot unthink. The United States can kill every fighter it encounters, but it cannot erase the conditions that create them, not quickly, not cleanly, not without becoming something else entirely. And that, more than ambushes or casualties, terrifies him. The radio crackles again. Orders, movement. Another mission, another village, another set of boys learning which sounds mean danger. Years later, historians will debate the ethics. Was it exploitation? Was it coercion? Was it nationalism weaponized too early? All of it. None of it. The truth is simpler and harder. Vietnam was not just a battlefield. It was a classroom. And by the time American soldiers realized who their enemies were, truly were, the lesson had already been taught. The children had grown up, and the war had grown roots. In the final years of American involvement, the pattern becomes unmistakable. Enemy fighters are younger, more patient, less reactive. They do not need to win today. They do not need to survive tomorrow. They only need to endure longer than the men sent to stop them. The United States begins withdrawing troops, not because it is beaten tactically, but because it no longer understands how to fight a war where time itself is the enemy. Mercer flies home in 1969. He returns to a country arguing about protests, politics, and purpose. People ask him what it was like. He never mentions the firefights. He never talks about tactics. He says one thing, and only once. They were younger than us, he says, and they weren't going anywhere. No one knows how to respond to that. When the last American helicopters lift from Saigon years later, the war does not end because someone surrendered. It ends because one side finally accepts something it has resisted since the beginning. This is not a war you win by killing faster. It is a war you lose by staying too long. The children who fought America do not disappear. They become veterans, officials, parents. Their memories do not fade. They teach them. The final transmission of the American war in Vietnam is not a declaration. It is an admission. You cannot defeat an enemy who has already given his childhood to the fight. Because by the time you realize what you are up against, he has already outgrown you.